The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but she was already awake. She'd been awake most of the night, really, listening to the soft, ragged breathing coming from the other side of the thin bedroom wall. Every time it hitched or turned into a wet cough, her stomach twisted. She lay still in the dark, eyes wide open, counting seconds between breaths like they were lifelines. Now, in the gray-blue light of early morning, she pushed herself up from the worn mattress, careful not to wake the sleeping toddler curled beside her. But Lily wasn't sleeping. Her little face was flushed, her lips dry, and when her mother gently brushed a hand over her forehead, the heat radiating off her skin made her flinch. "Mama?" Lily whispered, eyes fluttering open. They were glassy, unfocused. "Shh, baby. Go back to sleep," she murmured, tucking the blanket tighter around her daughter's shoulders. But Lily shook her head weakly. "My head hurts. And my throat." She swallowed hard. Of course it did. The fever had been climbing since yesterday afternoon. She'd given her children's medicine, wiped her down with a cool cloth, sung lullabies until her voice cracked, but nothing seemed to bring the temperature down for long. She glanced at the clock again. 37 a.m. She had to be at work by 7:45. Her stomach dropped. Work. The word felt heavy, like a stone in her chest. She worked as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized tech company downtown. It wasn't glamorous, filing reports, answering calls, making coffee for meetings, but it paid the rent. Barely. And lately, barely felt like a luxury. Last month, the landlord had slipped a notice under her door. Rent increase $120 starting next month. She'd stared at it for 10 minutes, hands shaking, before folding it into a tiny square and tucking it into the back of her checkbook, like it might disappear if she ignored it long enough. She couldn't afford to miss a single day. Not with the electric bill already 2 weeks late, not with the daycare payment due Friday, not with the stack of medical copays from Lily's last ear infection still sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. But Lily was sick. Really sick. She picked up her phone and scrolled to the daycare's number. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. "Hi, it's Lily's mom," she said when the director answered. "She's running a fever, about 102. I was wondering if—" "No," the woman cut in gently but firmly. "You know our policy, no fevers. She can't come back until she's fever-free for 24 hours without medicine." "I understand," she said quickly, voice tight. "It's just, I don't have anyone to watch her today. My sister's in another state and my neighbor's out of town." "I'm sorry," the director said, not unkindly, "but we can't risk spreading illness to the other kids." She hung up, throat burning. For a long moment, she just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, the one shaped like a crooked heart that she'd been meaning to report to maintenance for months. Her mind raced. She could call in sick. But her manager, Brenda, had already warned her last week, "We're short-staffed. If you need another personal day, you'll have to use PTO." And she had 0 PTO left. She'd used it all when Lily had pneumonia last winter. If she didn't show up, they might not fire her, but they'd definitely dock her pay. And without that paycheck, she wouldn't make rent. She looked down at Lily, who had drifted back into a fitful sleep, one small hand clutching the edge of her shirt. There was only one option. It was risky, stupid even, but it was the only way. She took a deep breath. "Okay, baby," she whispered, brushing hair from Lily's damp forehead. "We're going to work today." Getting ready felt like moving through syrup. Every step took twice as long with a sick child clinging to her leg. She dressed Lily in soft pajamas under a hoodie, wrapped her in a thick blanket, and packed a small tote bag with everything she could think of. Children's Tylenol, a sippy cup of apple juice, saltine crackers, wet wipes, a change of clothes, a favorite stuffed bunny named Mr. Nibbles, and her tablet loaded with cartoons. She double-checked the medicine dosage, now 1 teaspoon every 6 hours, and set a reminder on her phone. Then she slipped on her work shoes, grabbed her purse, and lifted Lily into her arms. The walk to the bus stop was short, but brutal. Rain had started falling overnight, turning the sidewalk slick and the air sharp with cold. Lily shivered against her chest, burying her face in her shoulder. "Almost there, sweet pea," she murmured, tightening her grip. The bus was crowded, smelling of wet coats and stale coffee. She found a seat near the back and settled Lily on her lap, tucking the blanket around her. A few passengers glanced their way, some with sympathy, others with mild annoyance, but no one said anything. Lily dozed off within minutes, her breathing still too fast, too shallow. As the bus rumbled toward downtown, she stared out the window at the gray city waking up, delivery trucks unloading, shopkeepers raising metal grates, office workers hurrying under umbrellas. She wondered how many of them had ever had to choose between their child's health and their job. Probably not many. Her office building loomed ahead, a sleek glass tower that always made her feel a little out of place in her second-hand coat and scuffed shoes. She'd worked there for 3 years, but she still felt like an imposter every time she swiped her badge at the front desk. Inside, the lobby was warm and quiet, the kind of hushed calm that only expensive buildings can afford. She nodded at the security guard who barely looked up from his screen. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless. Lily stirred, whimpering softly. "Mama, I don't feel good. I know, baby. Just a little longer." When the doors opened, she stepped into the familiar hum of the office. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the low murmur of conversations. She kept her head down, walking quickly toward her cubicle near the back, hoping no one would notice the small bundle in her arms, but someone did. "Hey!" a voice called out. She froze. It was Brenda, her manager. Mid-50s, sharp-eyed, always perfectly put together in tailored blazers and low heels. She stood by the coffee station, mug in hand, eyebrows raised. "You're here early," Brenda said. Then her gaze dropped to Lily. Her expression shifted, surprise, then concern, then something harder to read. Disapproval, maybe. "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile. "Lily's not feeling great, but I didn't want to miss the Henderson report deadline." Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced around as if checking to see who else was watching. "You know company policy," she said quietly. "No kids in the office unless it's an emergency." "This is an emergency," she wanted to say. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded. "I know, I'm really sorry. She's quiet, she'll just sleep in my cubicle. I promise no one will even know she's here." Brenda studied her for a long moment. Then with a sigh she said, "Fine, but if she makes noise or if HR finds out..." She let the threat hang in the air. "I understand." "Good." Brenda turned back to her coffee. "And get that report to me by noon." Relief washed over her, but it was fragile, like thin ice. She hurried to her desk, heart still pounding. Her cubicle was small, just enough room for a desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. She lowered Lily into the rolling chair, propping her up with the blanket and Mr. Nibbles. She plugged in the tablet, queued up a cartoon, and turned the volume all the way down. "Stay here, okay?" she whispered. "Be super quiet, like a mouse." Lily nodded weakly, eyes already drifting shut. She kissed her forehead, still too hot, then turned to her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as she pulled up the Henderson file. She had 2 hours to finish formatting, double-check the numbers, and email it to Brenda. Every few minutes she glanced over. Lily was still breathing softly. Good. But then, at 9:15 a.m., the office intercom crackled to life. "All staff, please report to conference room B for an impromptu all-hands meeting in 10 minutes. Her blood ran cold. "An all-hands meeting? Now?" She looked at Lily, who had startled awake at the sound. "Mama." "Shh, it's okay." But it wasn't okay. If she brought Lily to the meeting, everyone would see her. HR would definitely get involved. She could lose her job on the spot, but she couldn't leave her alone in the cubicle. What if she got worse? What if she cried out? Panic clawed at her throat. Think. Her eyes darted around the office. Then she spotted it, the supply closet down the hall. It was small but clean, and locked from the inside. It was the only option. She scooped Lily up, ignoring her soft protest, and hurried down the hallway. She unlocked the closet, flipped on the light, and set Lily gently on a stack of printer paper boxes. "Listen to me," she said, crouching down. Voice urgent, but calm. "You have to stay in here. Be very quiet. I'll be back in less than an hour, okay? Watch your cartoons, drink your juice. If you need me, knock 3 times on the door." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But I'm scared." "I know, baby. But you're so brave. And I'll be right down the hall, promise." She kissed her again, tucked the blanket around her, and handed her the tablet. Then, with a deep breath, she closed the door and turned the lock from the outside. Her hands shook as she walked back to her desk to grab her notepad. The meeting was already starting when she slipped into conference room B, about 30. Employees were gathered around the long table. At the head of the room stood him, the CEO. She'd seen him before, always from a distance, always in photos on the company intranet. But up close he was taller than she remembered, sharper, dark suit, crisp white shirt, the kind of posture that said he'd never worried about rent or sick kids or bus fare. He was mid-sentence, talking about quarterly projections, but she barely heard a word. Her ears were tuned to the hallway, listening for any sound from the supply closet. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, just as the CEO turned to write something on the whiteboard, the conference room door creaked open. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was Lily. She'd left the blanket behind. Her pajamas were rumpled, her hair messy, her face pale except for the red flush on her cheeks. She looked dazed, confused, like she'd woken up alone in the dark and followed the sound of voices. And then her eyes landed on the CEO. She took a wobbly step forward. The room went silent. The CEO turned, frowning slightly, probably wondering who let a child into a meeting. But before anyone could react, before her mother could leap up and scoop her away, Lily looked up at the tall man in the suit and whispered, voice thin but clear, "Daddy?" Time stopped. The CEO froze. His pen slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. His face, so composed a second ago, went utterly still. His eyes widened, then flickered with something raw, something shattered. He stared at Lily like he was seeing a ghost. And across the room, her mother felt the world tilt beneath her feet, because no one was supposed to know. No one was ever supposed to find out. The silence in the conference room was so thick it felt like breathing through cotton. No one moved. No one even blinked. All eyes darted between the little girl standing in the doorway, barefoot, wrapped in nothing but thin pajamas, and the man at the front of the room, who looked like he'd just been struck by lightning. He didn't say a word. Just stood there, frozen, his chest rising and falling too fast, like he'd forgotten how to breathe normally. His gaze stayed locked on the child, as if trying to solve a puzzle only he could see. And then Lily took another step forward. "Daddy?" she said again, softer this time, her voice trembling. She wasn't crying, just confused, feverish, reaching for something familiar in a sea of strangers. Her small hand stretched out toward him, fingers curling like she expected him to take it. That's when her mother finally moved. She pushed her chair back so fast it screeched against the floor, drawing gasps from a few coworkers. She didn't care. She was already halfway across the room, heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted out. She dropped to her knees in front of Lily, wrapping her arms around her daughter so tightly it might have hurt, if Lily hadn't melted into her like a sigh. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Not to Lily, but to the room, to the ceiling, to the universe. "I'm so sorry. She's sick. She doesn't know. She couldn't finish." Her throat closed up. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. She lifted Lily into her arms, blanket or no blanket, and turned to leave, head down, shoulders hunched like she was bracing for a storm. But before she could reach the door, a voice stopped her. Wait, it was him, the CEO. His voice was low, rough, nothing like the polished, calm tone he used during earnings calls or company announcements. This voice sounded like it had been dragged through gravel. She turned slowly, still holding Lily close. Lily buried her face in her shoulder, exhausted from the effort of standing, from the fever, from the confusion. He took a step toward them. Then another. His hands were empty, palms open, like he was showing he meant no harm. But his eyes were wide, searching, full of questions he couldn't ask out loud. "Is that—" He swallowed hard. "Is her name Lily?" Her breath caught. How did he know that? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because answering meant admitting everything, and admitting everything meant unraveling a secret she'd carried alone for 4 years. The kind of secret that could ruin her. Or him, or both. But Lily, half asleep and delirious, answered for her. "Yeah," she mumbled against her mother's neck. "Lily, the CEO..." He let out a shaky breath like he'd been holding it for years. He ran a hand through his hair, fingers trembling slightly. Then he looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in over 4 years. "You brought her to work," he said. Not accusingly. Just stunned. I had no choice, she whispered. Daycare wouldn't take her. I couldn't afford to miss work. I tried to keep her quiet. I put her in the supply closet. You put her in a closet? Someone muttered from the back. A few people shifted uncomfortably. It was clean, she snapped, sharper than she meant to. It was safe. She had her tablet, her juice, her medicine. I was going to check on her every 10 minutes. The meeting wasn't supposed to happen. Her voice cracked on the last word. She hated how weak it sounded. Hated that she was explaining herself like a child caught stealing cookies. But then he did something no one expected. He turned to the room full of stunned employees and said, "Meeting's over. Everyone, please go back to your desks." There were murmurs, confused glances, but no one argued. One by one they filed out, casting sideways looks at the scene unfolding in the doorway. Brenda lingered for a second, lips pressed tight, but even she left without a word. Soon it was just the three of them. Silence returned, but this time it was different. Heavy, yes, but also fragile. Like glass about to either shatter or be carefully set down. He took another step closer. Not too close, just close enough to see Lily's flushed cheeks, the dark circles under her eyes. "How long has she been sick?" he asked. "Since yesterday. Fever won't break. She's been sleeping all morning." She shifted Lily in her arms, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "I should take her home. Do you have a thermometer at home?" "Yes." "Medicine?" "Yes." "Someone to watch her if you need to rest?" She almost laughed. "No." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that answer away for later. Then he looked at Lily again. "She called me Daddy." She closed her eyes. "She saw your picture." "What picture?" "The one I kept." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. He knew. Years ago, before everything fell apart, he'd given her a framed photo of himself, smiling, relaxed, standing by a lake during a weekend trip they'd taken early in their relationship. She'd kept it on her nightstand for months after he left. Lily had grown up seeing it every night before bed. To her, that man was Daddy, even if he'd never held her, never changed her diaper, never sung her to sleep. "She thinks you're him," she said quietly. "Because you are." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "I didn't know," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I swear to you, I didn't know you were pregnant. When you called that last time, my assistant told me you were asking for money. You thought I was lying," she finished for him. "Or using you. Or trying to trap you." He didn't deny it, just looked down at his shoes, jaw tight. "I tried to find you after," he said after a long pause. "But you'd changed your number. Moved. I didn't even know your last name for sure, just what you told me, and I wasn't sure if it was real." "It was real," she said. "Everything was real. Except your belief in me." He winced. "I was scared," he admitted so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "My father walked out when I was 5. Left my mom with nothing. I swore I'd never do that to anyone. But when you said you were pregnant, all I could think was I'm going to fail her too. So I ran." She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The truth was out now, hanging between them like smoke. Lily stirred in her arms, whimpering softly. "Mama, my head hurts." "I know, baby." She rocked her gently. "We're going home soon," but he stepped forward again. "Don't go yet." She looked at him wary. "Why?" "Because she's sick. And you're exhausted, and I—" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I want to help." "Help how?" "You're my boss. This is already a mess." "I'm not talking about as your boss," he said firmly. "I'm talking as the man who might be her father." She stared at him. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. He ran a hand over his face. "Look, I know I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to even be in the same room as her after what I did. But if she's mine, and I think we both know she is, then I need to do something right, even if it's just today." She wanted to say no, wanted to walk out, protect Lily from more heartbreak, more disappointment. But Lily was burning up in her arms, and she hadn't slept in 2 days, and the thought of dragging her onto another bus, of facing another night alone with a sick child and no backup. It was too much, so she nodded. Just once. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Okay," he said. "First we get her checked out." 20 minutes later they were in his car, a quiet black sedan that smelled like leather and rain, heading to an urgent care clinic downtown. He drove carefully, one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally glancing back at Lily, who was curled up in the back seat with the blanket he'd grabbed from his office. "You keep a blanket in your car?" she asked, surprised. "For late nights at the office," he said. "Never thought I'd use it for this." At the clinic, he didn't hesitate. He walked in like he owned the place. Not in a rude way, but with a calm authority that got them seen within 10 minutes. While Lily sat on her mother's lap in the exam room, he stood by the door, arms crossed, watching the doctor check her ears, throat, and temperature. "Viral infection," the doctor said. "High fever, but no signs of strep or flu. Keep her hydrated. Rest children's acetaminophen every 6 hours. She should start feeling better in 48 hours. He listened intently, nodding, asking questions about dosage and warning signs. He even pulled out his phone to set a reminder for the next medicine time. After they left, he didn't drive back to the office. Instead, he pulled into a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and parked in front of a small cafe. "I know you haven't eaten," he said, "and she needs fluids." Inside, he ordered warm broth for Lily and a turkey sandwich for her. He got himself black coffee and sat across from them in a corner booth, giving them space but staying close. Lily sipped her broth slowly, color slowly returning to her cheeks. She kept glancing at him, curious now instead of confused. "Are you really my daddy?" she asked suddenly, spoon hovering midair. He froze, looked at her mother for permission. She gave a tiny nod. He turned back to Lily. "I think I am," he said gently, "and I'm very sorry I haven't been around." Lily considered this. Then, in the way only a 4-year-old can, she shrugged and went back to her soup. "Okay," he smiled, a real soft smile that changed his whole face. "Okay." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons and the hum of the cafe. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either, just new. After they ate, he drove them back to her apartment. He didn't offer to come inside, just helped her carry Lily up the 2 flights of stairs, then stood awkwardly in the hallway. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "To check on her," she nodded. "Okay," he hesitated. "And thank you for not keeping her from me." She looked at him, really looked at him. The tired lines around his eyes, the guilt in his posture, the hope barely peeking through. "I didn't keep her from you," she said quietly. "You left before I could even tell you about her." He swallowed. "I know." Then he turned and walked away. She watched him go, Lily heavy in her arms. Part of her wanted to call him back. Part of her wanted to slam the door and never see him again. But as she stepped inside her apartment, Lily already drifting back to sleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Exactly, but maybe the possibility of it. Later that night, after giving Lily her medicine and tucking her into bed, she sat on the couch with a cup of tea, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text. "How's she doing?" Just 3 words. No name, no title. Just a question from a man who might be a father. She typed back, "Fever's down." "Sleeping." A pause. Then, "Thank you for today." She didn't reply. But she didn't delete the message either. And for the first time in a long time, when she finally fell asleep on the couch, she didn't dream of rent notices or empty cupboards. She dreamed of a little girl holding 2 hands. One small, one large, walking through a sunlit park. It wasn't real. Not yet, but it wasn't impossible either. The next morning came too soon. Sunlight pushed through the thin curtains, and the apartment was quiet except for the soft, even breathing of a child finally sleeping without fever. She sat up slowly on the couch, stiff from sleeping in her clothes, and crept to Lily's room. Her daughter lay curled on her side, one arm wrapped around Mr. Nibbles, cheeks pale but no longer flushed. She pressed the back of her hand to Lily's forehead. Cool, normal. Relief washed over her like warm water. But the calm didn't last. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Brenda. "Need you in by 9. Henderson report needs final review before client call." She stared at the screen. Going back to work today felt like walking into a storm she'd barely escaped yesterday. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard it. The whispers would be waiting for her the moment she stepped off the elevator. The single mom who brought her sick kid to work. The one whose daughter called the CEO daddy. She could already imagine the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she walked by. And then there was him. She hadn't seen him since he left her apartment last night. No calls, no more texts. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe the reality of fatherhood had hit him like a bucket of ice water, and he'd decided it was easier to walk away again. She wanted to believe he wouldn't, but hope was a luxury she couldn't afford to trust. Still, she had no choice. Rent was due in 10 days. The electric bill was still unpaid, and if she lost this job, she'd be out on the street. She dressed quietly, made oatmeal for Lily, and packed her lunchbox with crackers and applesauce, just in case she wasn't fully better. She double-checked the medicine schedule, set reminders, and kissed Lily's forehead one last time. "I'll be back by 5, she whispered. "Be good for Ms. Rosa." Ms. Rosa was the elderly woman down the hall who sometimes watched Lily for a few hours in exchange for help with groceries. It wasn't ideal, but it was all she had. At the office, the air felt different, thicker. People didn't look at her directly, but she could feel their eyes on her back as she walked to her desk. A few murmured, "Good morning," but their voices were careful, polite in a way that felt like distance. She kept her head down, logged into her computer, and tried to disappear into her work. At 10:17 a.m., an email popped up in her inbox. "Please come to my office when you have a moment. Dr." Her stomach dropped. She glanced toward the glass-walled corner office at the end of the floor. The blinds were open. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his screen, but she could feel him watching her too. She took a deep breath and stood up. The walk to his office felt endless. Every step echoed in the quiet hallway. When she reached the door, she knocked lightly. "Come in." She stepped inside. The office was neat. Books lined up perfectly, a sleek laptop, a single framed photo on the shelf. She didn't look too closely, but she knew it wasn't the lake photo. That one was still on her nightstand. He stood as she entered, then gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat." She sat, hands folded in her lap, back straight. She didn't say anything. Let him speak first. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit she remembered from years ago. "How's Lily this morning?" "Better, fever's gone. She's eating again." "Good." He nodded, then paused. "I spoke with HR this morning." Her heart leapt into her throat. "You told them?" "No," he said quickly. "Not about us." "Not about Lily. I told them you had a family emergency yesterday and that bringing your daughter in was a one-time exception that I approved. They've agreed to drop any policy concerns as long as it doesn't happen again." She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Thank you. But that's not why I asked you here," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I've been thinking all night. About everything. About what I missed. About what I owe, not just to you but to her." She looked down at her hands. "You don't owe us anything." "I do," he said firmly. "And I want to start making it right. Not with money. Not with grand gestures. But with presence. With time." She finally met his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to be in her life. If you'll let me." The words hung in the air, simple but enormous. She wanted to believe him. But years of silence, of wondering if he ever thought about them, of raising a child alone through sleepless nights and scraped-together meals, they weren't erased by one kind offer. "It's not that simple," she said softly. "You can't just show up and expect to be daddy overnight. She's 4 years old. She's never met you. She called you that because she saw a picture, not because she knows you." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking to move in or take her to soccer practice next week. I'm asking for a chance. To start slow, maybe coffee on Saturday, just the 3 of us. No pressure. No expectations. Let her see me as a person, not a ghost." She thought about it. Lily was curious, not scared. She hadn't cried when she saw him. She'd just accepted him. Kids were like that, open-hearted until the world taught them to close up. "Okay," she said finally. "One coffee. Saturday morning. But if she gets upset, we leave." He nodded, a small, grateful smile tugging at his lips. "Fair enough." Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. "I also spoke with our benefits team. You're eligible for emergency dependent care leave, paid, for up to 5 days this quarter. You can use it any time. No questions asked," she blinked. "I didn't even know that existed." "Most people don't," he admitted. "It's buried in the handbook. But it's there. And I'm making sure HR sends a company-wide reminder about it next week." She felt a lump form in her throat. This wasn't charity. It was change. Real structural change because of her. Because of Lily. "Thank you," she said again, voice thick. He waved it off. "Don't thank me." Thank the fact that I finally opened my eyes. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension easing like a knot slowly untangling. Then he asked, "Do you remember that weekend at Silver Lake, when it rained the whole time, and we stayed in that cabin playing cards?" She smiled faintly. "You kept losing at Go Fish, said the fish were rigged." "I did," he laughed softly. "And you made that terrible soup with too much pepper." "It was not terrible," she protested, but she was smiling now. "No," he said, his voice turning gentle. "It was perfect." The memory hung between them, warm, real, untouched by everything that came after. When she left his office, the hallway didn't feel so heavy anymore. Saturday morning dawned bright and crisp. She dressed Lily in clean jeans and a yellow sweater, brushed her hair into 2 neat pigtails, and explained again that they were meeting the man from the office for coffee. "He's going to be nice," she said. "But if you don't like it, we can leave any time, okay?" Lily nodded, clutching Mr. Nibbles. "Is he really my daddy?" "He could be," she said carefully, "if he shows us he wants to be." They arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. He was already there, sitting at a corner table with 3 mugs steaming in front of him. He stood when he saw them, a little nervous, a little hopeful. He didn't reach for Lily, just smiled and said, "Hi." Lily studied him for a long moment. Then, in that quiet way children have, she climbed into the chair beside him and said, "Do you like pancakes?" He looked surprised, then grinned. "I love pancakes." "Me too," she said. And just like that, the ice was broken. They talked about silly things, favorite animals, cartoon shows, the best kind of ice cream. He listened more than he spoke, asked Lily questions, laughed at her answers. He didn't try to impress, didn't try to force anything, just showed up. Halfway through, Lily spilled her hot chocolate. Instead of flinching or calling a server, he grabbed napkins and helped her clean it up, making silly faces to make her laugh. She did, giggling like she hadn't in weeks. Watching them, she felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of trust. After an hour, Lily yawned and leaned against her. "Tired, Mama. It's okay, sweet pea. We can go." But before she could stand, he said, "Wait." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I made this for her." Lily took it, eyes wide. She tore open the paper to find a handmade book. Cardstock pages, crayon drawings. Simple words. "Lily and the Brave Little Bunny." The cover read, inside. The story was about a little girl named Lily, who went on adventures with her bunny, facing dragons which looked suspiciously like vacuum cleaners, and climbing mountains which were clearly couch cushions. On the last page it said, "And every night her daddy read her this story, because he loved her very much." Lily traced the words with her finger. "You wrote this?" "I did," he said softly. "Do you like it?" She nodded, hugging it to her chest. "Can you read it to me?" He looked at her mother, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded. And so right there in the cafe, he read the story aloud, his voice warm, steady, full of a tenderness she hadn't heard before. Lily listened, eyes half closed, safe in the space between them. When he finished, she whispered, "Read it again?" He smiled. "Anytime you want." On the walk home, Lily held her mother's hand in one and the book in the other. "He's nice," she said simply. "Yes," she replied. "He is." That night, after Lily was asleep, she sat on the couch and opened the envelope he'd given her at the cafe. Inside was a printed copy of the company's updated dependent care policy, now highlighted, simplified, and accompanied by a note. No parent should have to choose between their child and their job. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her checkbook, right next to the rent notice. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone, and for the first time ever, she let herself imagine a future where her daughter had 2 parents who loved her. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but truly it wouldn't be easy. There would be hard conversations, missed steps, moments of doubt. But as she looked at the handmade book on Lily's nightstand, its pages already slightly crumpled from tiny hands, she knew one thing for sure. They were finally starting. The weeks that followed weren't perfect, but they were real. Saturday coffees turned into Sunday walks in the park. He didn't show up with fancy gifts or promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he brought patience. He learned how Lily liked her toast, lightly buttered, cut into triangles. He remembered she was scared of vacuum cleaners, so he never turned one on when he visited. He sat on the floor of her tiny living room and helped her build block towers that always collapsed, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. And slowly, Lily began to trust him. She stopped calling him the man from the office, started saying Daddy without hesitation. Not because she was told to, but because it felt right. Because he was there, every time. Her mother watched it all unfold like someone waking from a long dream. She still braced for the day he'd disappear again. But he didn't. Even when work got busy, even when a big project demanded late nights, he always sent a text. Running late, but I'll call Lily before bed. And he did. Every night. His voice soft through the phone as he read her a story or asked about her day. One evening, about 6 weeks after that first coffee, Lily came home from preschool with a drawing. It was a family portrait, 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. 2 adults, 1 child. The taller adult on the left had a scribbled tie. The one on the right had long hair and a big smile. In the corner, in wobbly letters, she'd written, "My family." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Lily wasn't pretending. She wasn't confused. She was just happy. That night, after tucking Lily in, she sat on the couch and stared at the drawing taped to the fridge. She hadn't planned this, hadn't hoped for it, but here it was, something she thought she'd lost forever, a family. Not the kind in storybooks, but the kind built slowly, with second chances and quiet acts of showing up. Still, there were things they hadn't talked about. Big things like custody, like money, like what this all meant for the future. She knew he was waiting for her to bring it up, but every time she tried, fear clamped down on her throat. What if he thought she was asking for support? What if he pulled back, thinking she wanted to trap him again? Then one rainy Thursday, he showed up at her door unannounced, not with flowers or apologies, but with a folder. "Can we talk?" he asked, water dripping from his coat. She nodded, stepping aside. Lily was already asleep, so they sat at the small kitchen table, mugs of tea between them. He opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, legal-looking but not intimidating. "I met with a family mediator," he said gently. "Not a lawyer, just someone neutral. She helped me draft something simple. A parenting agreement." Her stomach tightened. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to," he said, "because I don't want you to ever wonder where I stand. I'm not here just for weekends and pancakes. I'm here for doctor's appointments, school meetings, bad dreams at 2 a.m. I want to be her father. Legally, emotionally, every way that matters." He slid a page toward her. It outlined visitation, every other weekend, 1 weekday evening, holidays shared fairly. It included a section about medical decisions, school choices, even how they'd handle birthdays. At the bottom, in bold letters, both parents agree to prioritize the child's emotional and physical well-being above all else. She read it twice. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. "You didn't put anything about money in here," she said quietly. "No," he admitted, "because I didn't want you to think this was about obligation. But I also know you've been carrying everything alone for years. So I opened a savings account for Lily, for college, for emergencies, for whatever she needs. I'll contribute monthly. It's in her name. You'll have full access." She looked up at him. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I should have done it 4 years ago," he said simply. "Because every time I look at her, I see the years I missed and I can't get them back. But I can show up for the ones ahead." She swallowed hard. "What if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing or push too hard or—" "You won't," he interrupted softly. "Because you love her, and that's the only thing that matters." They sat in silence for a while, the rain tapping against the window. Then he asked, "Do you think she'd like to come to the lake this weekend? The one from that old photo? It's quiet this time of year. We could rent a cabin. Just the 3 of us." She thought about it. The same lake where they'd once been young and hopeful, before fear got in the way. Going back felt like closing a circle. "Yes," she said. "I think she'd love that." The cabin was small but cozy. Wood floors, a stone fireplace, windows that looked out over the water. Lily ran inside the moment they arrived, squealing at the loft bed in the tiny kitchen. She claimed the top bunk immediately, dragging Mr. Nibbles up the ladder like a seasoned explorer. That first night, After roasting marshmallows and telling silly stories by the fire, they sat on the porch while Lily slept. The lake was still, reflecting the stars like scattered glass. "I used to come here with my dad," he said quietly, before he left. "We'd fish off that dock every summer." She didn't say anything, just let him talk. He promised he'd teach me to row a boat, but he never came back after that last summer. I waited on that dock for weeks, thinking maybe he'd show up late. He shook his head. "I swore I'd never do that to my own kid. And then, I did." "You didn't know," she said. "But I could have tried harder to find out," he replied. "I let my fear write the story instead of asking for the truth." She looked at him, really looked. Saw the weight he carried, the regret he hadn't voiced until now. "We can't change the past," she said, "but we can choose what comes next." He nodded. "Together?" "Together." The next morning, Lily insisted on fishing off the dock, just like in his stories. He showed her how to hold the pole, how to be patient. She lasted 10 minutes before declaring fishing boring and running back to build a rock castle on the shore. He laughed and followed her, helping her stack smooth stones into wobbly towers. Later, as they packed to leave, Lily ran up to him breathless. "Daddy, look what I found." She held out a smooth, flat stone painted with a bright red heart. He turned it over. On the back, in faded marker, someone had written, "Love lasts." He stared at it for a long time. Then he knelt down and pressed it into Lily's hand. "You keep it," he said. "But whenever you look at it, remember, love isn't just words. It's showing up. Every day." Lily nodded seriously, like she understood. Then she slipped the stone into her pocket and took his hand. "Can we come back next summer?" "We'll come back every summer," he promised. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, the painted stone clutched in her fist. Her mother watched him in the rearview mirror, his eyes on the road, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel, the other occasionally reaching back to make sure Lily was still covered with her blanket. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic speech, just a man finally becoming the father he was meant to be. One quiet, steady choice at a time, and for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be mended, not to how they were, but into something new, something stronger, something real. The morning of Lily's 5th birthday dawned warm and golden, the kind of summer day that feels like a gift. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window as her mother flipped pancakes, humming softly to herself. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and from down the hall, she could hear Lily chattering to Mr. Nibbles about how today was the most important day ever. She smiled, flipping the last pancake onto the plate. It had been almost a year since that rainy morning when she'd carried a feverish child into an office building, heart pounding, certain her world was about to collapse. Back then she couldn't have imagined this, couldn't have pictured a future where her daughter woke up excited not just for presents, but because Daddy was coming over for cake. Yes, he'd earned that word now. Not by title or biology alone, but by showing up. Through flu nights and school plays, through awkward first meetings with teachers and quiet talks about feelings. He'd learned to braid Lily's hair, badly at first, better now, remembered her favorite juice box flavor, and once stayed up until 2 a.m., helping her build a cardboard spaceship for a science fair. He'd even started coming to parent-teacher conferences, not as the CEO, but as just Dad. And today he was bringing the cake. She set the plate on the table just as Lily came running in, barefoot and beaming, wearing her favorite dinosaur pajamas even though it was past 10. "Mama, is it time? Is he here yet?" "Not yet, sweet pea," she said, ruffling her hair. "But soon. Go brush your teeth so you're ready." Lily groaned but obeyed, dragging her feet down the hall. Her mother watched her go, heart full in a way that still surprised her. She used to think love was something you held tightly, protectively, something you guarded because the world would take it if you weren't careful. But now she understood. Real love was something you let grow even when it scared you, even when it meant sharing your child's heart with someone who'd once walked away. The doorbell rang at 11:15 a.m. Lily sprinted to the door before she could even say, "Wait." She flung it open to find him standing on the porch, holding a bakery box in one hand and a wrapped present in the other. He wore jeans and a soft-looking t-shirt, no suit, no tie, just a man ready to celebrate his daughter. "Happy birthday, Lilybug," he said. Crouching down so they were eye to eye, Lily threw her arms around his neck. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it," he murmured, hugging her tight. Her mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smiling despite herself. "You're early." "I know," he admitted, standing up. "But I couldn't wait." They moved to the backyard, a small patch of grass she'd spent weeks cleaning up, stringing fairy lights between the trees, setting up a folding table with mismatched chairs. A few neighbors had stopped by with cards and cupcakes. Nothing fancy, just simple, warm, real. He set the cake on the table, a chocolate one with rainbow sprinkles, Lily's favorite, and placed the gift beside it. "I made her something again," he said quietly to her mother. "Hope it's okay?" "It's more than okay," she replied. "She talks about that bunny book every night." He smiled, a little shy. "This one's about birthdays." As the afternoon unfolded, it felt less like a party and more like a quiet homecoming. Lily opened presents, a new art set, a stuffed sloth, a puzzle with 100 pieces. She laughed when the neighbor's dog stole a cupcake, shrieked with delight when the sprinkler turned on, and insisted on dancing to the music playing from the old Bluetooth speaker on the picnic bench. He didn't hover, didn't try to take over.
He just belonged.
He helped refill juice cups, wiped frosting off Lily's chin, and sat cross-legged on the grass while she showed him how to draw a super dino cat. At one point, he caught her mother's eye across the yard and gave her a look that said everything. "Thank you for letting me be here." Later, when it was time for cake, Lily climbed onto his lap without hesitation. He held her steady as she leaned forward to blow out the candles, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. "Make a wish," someone called. Lily closed her eyes tight, lips pursed in concentration. Then, puff, all 5 candles went out in one breath. "What did you wish for?" he asked, voice soft. She grinned. "Can't tell. Or it won't come true." He laughed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Fair enough." After cake, the guests slowly drifted home, leaving behind crumpled napkins, half-empty cups, and the sweet mess of a day well spent. Her mother started gathering plates, but he stopped her. "I'll clean up," he said. "You go sit with her." She didn't argue. She walked over to the porch swing where Lily was curled up, eyelids heavy, the birthday crown slightly crooked on her head. She sat beside her, pulling her close. "Tired, birthday girl?" Lily murmured. "Best day ever." "Why's that?" "'Cause Daddy was here, and you were here, and we had cake, and no one was sad." Her mother kissed her forehead. No one was sad. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Behind them she could hear him stacking chairs, rinsing plates, humming under his breath. The ordinary sounds of someone who belonged. When Lily finally fell asleep, he carried her inside, tucking her gently into bed, adjusting Mr. Nibbles under her arm. He stood for a moment in the doorway watching her sleep, his expression unreadable but tender. "She's amazing," he whispered as they stepped back into the living room. "She is," her mother agreed, "and she's got 2 parents who love her. That helps." He turned to her, hands in his pockets. "I know I don't say it enough, but thank you for not giving up on me, for giving me a chance to know her. I didn't do it for you," she said honestly. "I did it for her. She deserved to know you, not the idea of you, but the real you. And you showed up as him." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm still learning. Every day. We all are." They stood there for a while, not needing to fill the space with words. The air between them wasn't romantic, not in the way it once was, but it was something deeper. Respect, trust, a shared purpose. Before he left, he handed her a small envelope. "For you," he said. Not for Lily. She opened it later after he'd driven away. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter. "I used to think being a good father meant providing money, a name, a future. But watching you raise her alone taught me something different. Being a father means showing up when it's hard, listening when you're tired, loving even when you're scared. You showed me how, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to that example. D." She folded the letter and tucked it into the back of Lily's latest storybook, the one about birthdays, where the last page read, "And the best gift of all was having her family together." Months passed. Seasons turned. Life settled into a new rhythm. He picked Lily up every other Friday after school, returning her Sunday evenings with stories of museum trips, pancake breakfasts, and bedtime battles over brushing teeth. He attended every school event, sat in the front row at her tiny violin recital, even though she only played 3 notes, and helped her plant sunflowers in a pot on her windowsill. Her mother no longer flinched when the phone rang, no longer braced for bad news. Instead, she found herself texting him photos of Lily's drawings, asking his opinion on winter coats, even laughing with him over coffee about the chaos of potty training flashbacks. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, disagreements about bedtime, confusion over school forms, the occasional wave of old hurt that surfaced without warning. But they talked through it. Not as exes, not as boss and employee, but as parents. One evening, as they stood together at Lily's school open house, watching her proudly point out her artwork on the classroom wall, he turned to her and said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed that day you told me you were pregnant?" She thought about it. Sometimes. But then I look at her, and I think maybe everything happened the way it needed to. So she'd have a mom who fought for her, and a dad who chose her, not just because he had to, but because he wanted to. He smiled, eyes on Lily, who was now demonstrating her best dinosaur roar to a very patient teacher. "Yeah," he said softly, "she's worth choosing. Every single day." And in that moment, standing in a brightly lit elementary school hallway surrounded by crayon drawings and tiny chairs, they both knew this wasn't a fairy tale with a neat ending. It was something better. It was real life, messy, healing, full of second chances. And for the first time in a long time, it was enough. It had been 2 years since that rainy morning in the office hallway, the day a feverish little girl wandered into a meeting and changed everything. Now, on a bright Saturday in early spring, the same child stood in the middle of a sunlit backyard, arms outstretched like an airplane, laughing as cherry blossom petals drifted down around her. She was 7 now, all knees and curiosity, with a gap where her front tooth used to be and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Her mother watched from the porch steps, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, heartful in a way that still caught her off guard sometimes. The backyard wasn't fancy, just a patch of grass, a swing set someone had given them, and a garden bed where Lily insisted on growing magic beans, which turned out to be regular green beans, but no one had the heart to tell her. But it was theirs, and it was enough. Inside the house, the front door opened and closed. A moment later, he stepped onto the porch, holding 2 grocery bags and wearing that slightly rumpled look he always had after a long week of meetings. He'd traded his suit for jeans and a faded hoodie, and there was flour on his sleeve from the pancakes he'd attempted to make earlier that morning, before Lily declared them too flat and took over. "Hey," he said, setting the bags down. "She's in full flight mode, I see." "Since 8 a.m., her mother replied with a smile. "Said she's practicing to be a bird for the school talent show." He chuckled, sitting beside her. "She told me. I offered to build her wings out of cardboard and feathers. She said daddy birds don't wear cardboard. That's for dragons." Smart kid. The smartest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Lily spin in circles until she collapsed onto the grass, giggling. It still amazed her how natural this felt now, how easy. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells. Just 2 people who'd been broken once, but had stitched themselves back together, not for each other, but for the small, bright soul who needed them both. He reached into one of the grocery bags and pulled out a folder. "Got the school form signed," he said, handing it to her. "Also, I talked to the principal about that field trip to the Science Museum. They said they can accommodate Lily's peanut allergy if we send her lunch separately." She took the folder, flipping through the pages. "You didn't have to do all that." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to. Besides, she asked me last night if I'd be there for the trip. Said she wanted to show me the robot exhibit." Her throat tightened. "She talks about you all the time, you know, even when you're not here." "I know," he said softly. "She told me." He paused. "She also told me she's scared about moving to 3rd grade. "Yeah," she sighed. "Says 2nd grade was baby stuff and 3rd grade is real work. I told her she's ready, but I think she's just nervous about changing teachers. She'll be fine," he said. "She's got grit. And she's got us." That word us and used to feel foreign. Now it felt like home. Later that afternoon, they all went to the park. Lily raced ahead on her bike, training wheels long gone. her bright yellow helmet bobbing like a sunflower. They walked behind her side by side, not touching but close enough that their shoulders brushed sometimes. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" he asked suddenly. She glanced at him. "All the time. If I'd answered your call back then, if I'd believed you, you would have missed out on 2 years of her first steps, first words, first day of school," she said gently. "But you didn't miss everything. And that's what matters," he nodded, watching Lily pedal furiously up a small hill. "I used to dream about her," he admitted. "Before I knew she existed. Just a feeling. Like there was someone out there I was supposed to protect. I thought it was guilt. Turns out it was her." She didn't reply. Some truths didn't need words. At the top of the hill, Lily stopped and turned, waving wildly. "Look, I did it." "You're amazing," he called back. She beamed, then wobbled slightly on the descent but caught herself. When she reached them, she hopped off her bike, cheeks flushed. "Can we get ice cream?" "Only if you promise to eat your dinner," her mother said. "Promise." Lily held up 3 fingers like a scout. "Scout's honor," he laughed. "Since when are you a scout?" "Since today," she declared. "Daddy, can you carry my bike?" He hoisted the small bike onto his shoulder without hesitation. "Lead the way, Scout." They walked to the corner shop, Lily chattering nonstop about her plans to invent a robot that makes pancakes and cleans your room. Inside, she ordered mint chocolate chip. He got coffee swirl, and her mother chose strawberry. They sat on a bench outside, licking cones as the late afternoon sun warmed their faces. Halfway through, Lily's ice cream started dripping down her wrist. Instead of scolding her, he pulled a napkin from his pocket, because of course he carried napkins now, and wiped her hand gently. "Messy eater," he teased. "But happy," she said, grinning with green-stained teeth. Later, back at the house, Lily insisted on showing him her latest art project, a painting of the 3 of them holding hands under a rainbow. "That's you," she said, pointing to the tall figure with a tie. "And that's Mama, and that's me. And the dog we're gonna get someday." He looked at her mother, eyebrows raised. "A dog?" "Don't look at me," she said, holding up her hands. "I said maybe." In a few years, Lily rolled her eyes dramatically. Adults are so slow. That night, after Lily was in bed, after stories, after tucking in Mr. Nibbles, after the 3rd glass of water, her mother walked him to the door. "Thanks for today," she said. "Thanks for letting me be part of it," he replied. He hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should do something bigger for her next birthday. A real party. With friends, games, maybe a bounce house." She smiled. "She'd love that." "I'll plan it," he offered. "You just show up. I'll be there." He nodded, then turned to leave. But before he reached his car, he stopped and came back. "One more thing." He pulled a small envelope from his jacket. "I've been putting a little extra into her college fund every month. Not because I think she needs it to be rich, but because I want her to know she can dream big. Go anywhere. Be anything." She took the envelope, fingers brushing his for just a second. "She already knows that." "Because of you?" He shook his head. "Because of us." And with that, he got into his car and drove away, taillights fading into the dusk. Inside, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Lily talking to herself in her sleep, probably planning her next great adventure. Her mother stood in the doorway for a long time, the envelope warm in her hand. She thought about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering how she'd make it through another week, all the times she'd rehearsed angry speeches in her head, ready to hurl at him if he ever showed his face again. But life had a funny way of rewriting stories. She hadn't gotten the fairy tale she once imagined, the one with grand gestures and perfect timing. What she got was better. A quiet, steady love built on showing up, on choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. And Lily? She got what every child deserves. 2 parents who loved her fiercely, not because it was easy, but because she was worth it. The next morning, Lily came into the kitchen holding the painted stone from the lake, the one that said, "Love lasts." She'd kept it on her nightstand since that first trip. "Mama," she said, serious as could be, "does love really last?" Her mother knelt down, brushing hair from her daughter's eyes. "Only if you take care of it," she said. "Like a plant. You water it. You give it sun. You don't walk away when it gets messy." Lily thought about that. Then she tucked the stone into her pocket. Good, 'cause I'm gonna take really good care of mine. And as she ran outside to feed the magic beans, her mother knew this story wasn't over. It was just beginning.